Hi everyone, I'm Anne and I am a current Fulbright ETA/TAPiF English teaching assistant here in Marseille, France. And today I wanted to talk about five things that are super important to know before embarking on your own TAPiF or Fulbright ETA journey. So without further ado, let's go for it. Alright, so I am again reading from my laptop if I'm looking down, but the first and most important thing that anybody going into their TAPiF experience needs to know is just how inconsistent this program can be. There are so many people posting their experiences online, including myself, but there are also so many variables that the program leaves up to fate that it's really difficult to know what to expect, and you can't necessarily base your expectations on any one story that you're hearing online. So there's a couple factors that I think can make or break your TAPiF experience that are pretty random in terms of how they pick it, which are your school, your location, and who your professeur référent is. So the teacher that is like your supervisor, the person that you work with. You have some control over the level of school that you're teaching, the region that you might be placed in, the size of the city that you're put in, but all of those things are still uncertain. And I know so many people who've gotten placed in rural locations who wanted to be in a big city, who got put in primary schools, who wanted to be in high schools, etc. I will say that you're likely to get one of the three regions that you've ranked, but it doesn't guarantee anything in terms of location. Just statistically, you probably won't be in the main city that the region is named after just because you're in the Académie de say Nantes. You could still be 2 hours away from Nantes, so you need to be mentally prepared to kind of be anywhere. You can also be placed at up to 3 schools that you end up having to commute between, which would also drastically change your teaching experience and your general experience overall. In addition, you're notified of your region at the time of your acceptance, but you won't really know your school until you get your document called an arrêté de nomination over the summer. And some people get theirs as late as early September. And this, as a side note, is also just really stressful because you need this document to apply for your visa. So when you get it super late, that can definitely cause a lot of anxiety. So even as you accept your TAPiF acceptance, you likely still won't know the level of school that you'll be teaching in or your location, which I'm sure has to be really crazily nerve-wracking. One advantage of doing the Fulbright program as like a complement to the TAPiF program is that you do know your school immediately as you're accepted in March or April. So you can take that into your decision consideration, but even then it's not like a malleable situation. You are placed where you're placed and there's not much you can do to change it. Not only is location important, but different schools also function at various levels of efficiency. There are, I want to say, like thousands of TAPiF schools in France, and they are not all the same level of efficiency, the same level of functioning. The last make or break thing that is left up to fate, and this is kind of related to that efficiency factor and how well things go administratively at your school, is your prof ref. So this is the person who you essentially have to rely on for everything at your school. They make your schedule, they communicate with other teachers for you, they help you with your papers, and it's also essentially the only person that you know for emotional support when you arrive before you make other friends. They can have your back in really important moments, be a great support, be a great middleman between you and the French administration, which is an entire other video that I could make. Or they could be really lackluster and slow and create a lot of bottleneck moments for you. So who you get assigned to really matters. I've also heard of people who've had prof refs who don't even work at their schools. But there's also situations like my own where my prof ref has just been amazing and a great partner in the work that I'm doing. So again, totally random, huge variable. So doing TAPiF in general is definitely an exercise in letting go of control and accepting the conditions that life hands to you, which is not my strong suit. So being someone who is open to a lot of different situations will really serve you. And if you are that person, this can be an incredible life-changing experience. But if you're not, I think it's important to be prepared mentally, emotionally. The second thing that you should know before doing TAPiF is just how lonely this experience can be. I think I came into this imagining that I would make so many friends super quickly, that I would always be busy and have people to hang out with. And I probably, like you and a lot of other people who are doing TAPiF, am doing it right after graduating college, where I was surrounded by people to hang out or talk with at my fingertips. And I subconsciously thought that that would continue going that way during TAPiF. But that has not been further from the truth. Working in a school, you're not necessarily constantly around people who are going to be your best friends. You're mostly interacting with your students and your colleagues who could be around your age. In that case, that works out. But they can also be way older than you and like in different life periods. You also only work 12 hours in a week, so you have to fill your time otherwise, and you have to really intentionally try and build a community for yourself. For me, I've never had to do that before in my life. I've always kind of been a student surrounded by other people, like in my dorm, in clubs, in classes. So that continues to just be a huge, huge struggle for me. I was lucky enough to be placed in the same region where my best friend lives, and I have an amazing relationship with my prof ref. I've joined a choir. I've joined all the group chats and all the Facebook chats, of the TAPiF assistants, but I still find myself alone most of the time. And it's a loneliness that I've never really experienced before and has probably been the most difficult part of my time here. So before you come, I would definitely try and work on your ability to spend time with yourself, to travel alone, to entertain yourself. I mean, I would say put yourself out there, but I think that even if you do that, you still might end up having a bit of a lonely experience. So that's just something you have to be prepared for. And in the end, it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing once it's something that you're used to, because I think in some ways it's a good preparation for the rest of your life. The third thing that you should know before doing TAPiF that I have on this list is definitely something that you will have heard from others and even from the program officers themselves. And that is, in most cases, this program does not pay a living wage. We get essentially 800 euros a month, and though some placements will give you housing at no cost or at a super low cost, that's not something that you can rely on. So going back to point number one. You also don't get paid until the end of your first month, so you have to have significant savings or supplemental income coming into the program. It's going to be the most expensive in the beginning, as you will probably have to get an Airbnb while you find permanent housing, and there's all these setup costs. Fulbright pays for your flights to France and your flight back home, but TAPiF won't, so that's another big cost upfront right there. Rent can be high in France, especially in bigger cities where I think most assistants will want to live. Food and cost of living is not too bad unless you're in Paris, but if you want to travel around Europe, your income probably will not be able to cover that. Every TAPiFer that I know either has, one, a ton of savings coming into the program, two, has a second or third job, 3, has parental support, or 4, is just in a ton of credit card debt. Fulbright will supplement your TAPiF income so that you have somewhere around 1,200 euros, though the supplement depends on which placement you have, which I think makes for a decently livable income, though having some savings still does help, especially if you're looking to travel a lot around the continent while you're here. The fourth thing that was a bit of a shock to me, actually, is that your French won't automatically improve just from doing TAPiF. I kind of expected the immersion environment of living in France to really push my French to like a completely fluent, super advanced level, but that has not been the case at all. I find that I'm not really speaking, reading, or writing in French a ton. At school, I teach in English, and all my colleagues want to speak to me in English to improve their English. Outside, you're kind of just running errands, I guess, in French. So you get really good at surface level interactions, but there aren't a ton of ready opportunities for you to have deeper, more advanced conversations. I imagine if you came in with a B1 level or somewhere around there, I think B1 is the requirement for the program, but it can be really helpful and you learn to be a lot more comfortable with French. But if you're trying to get, say, from a C1 to a C2 or beyond, you really do need to put in extra effort to try and find conversation partners, really force your colleagues to speak in French with you, try and meet other young French people, say through Tinder or Bumble, or even take classes at a university or language center, just like you would if you were trying to improve your French at home in the US. The last thing I have to say is more of a France thing than a TAPiF thing, but France is not, for lack of a better word, a very inclusive place. And I don't mean that as in, you won't be accepted or people will necessarily treat you badly. But I think France tends to still be a very homogenous society in most places. I think maybe in the super big cities you have, bigger immigrant populations, and so this may not be as much the case. But I found that, especially not being a native French speaker, I think it has less to do with the fact that I'm not a native French speaker, more so than, what I look like or my background or things like that. But once people identify you as an American, it kind of becomes one of your defining traits, even if you don't necessarily want it to be. When you speak out loud and you have an accent, a lot of times people will just respond to you in English, which is something that I took kind of badly when I first got here, but then you kind of just get used to it. People see you as an outsider, not in a bad way, but as in, like, it's cool. They don't see people like you all the time, and so they want to capitalize on that, maybe work on their English. But it ends up being kind of an uncomfortable situation for me because I kind of just want to walk into a store and be like the same as someone else who has lived in and grown up, in the city that I'm in. And it's really hard to blend in, I think, in the same way as you can in the US. This might be because I'm from Southern California, and so I'm really used to being around this big immigrant population. And, people, I think, like, in stores and things like that don't even really hear accents anymore because they're so common. Even if they do, I mean, this might be more because Americans don't speak other languages, but even if you have an accent, you're treated more or less, I mean, unless you run into someone who's really racist or xenophobic, but you're responded to more or less the same as someone who doesn't have an accent, or who, shows more markers of being from a certain place. Just like your origin matters less, I think, in the US, because we have such like a melting pot type of mentality that I don't think France has been able to attain yet, though I think that things are kind of moving in that direction. But I think that was an interesting thing that I wasn't necessarily prepared for, I don't necessarily love, but has just become something I've had to accept as part of everyday life here in France. So there you go. Those are 5 things that I think are important to know before you embark on your TAPiF or your Fulbright ETA experience here in France. I wish everyone the best of luck, whether you're in the application stage, whether you're waiting to hear back, whether you're about to leave for France, or whether you're over the summer waiting for your visa documents and just feeling in general very anxious about it. I think that everything will sort itself out in the end. You will be okay. My comments and my messages are always open for any questions, any video requests as per usual, and I'll see you next time.